Welcome to the Night Temple, a weekly podcast about art, memory, and inspiration.
Hi everyone and welcome to the Night Temple. We're your hosts, Carisa
And Andrew.
and we're here today with Mike Cuenca. And Mike is an amazing filmmaker, a musician. You soundtrack a lot of your own films as well, so we've got a very multi-talented person here with us today.
And probably the most prolific filmmaker I know. How many films have you done in the last year?
The last 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, 7 total films.
That's
crazy.
crazy.
Feature films,
Yeah.
7 total feature films in the last 2.5 years. So yes, very significant, very prolific. And we've seen your stuff. It's amazing. It's, we were mentioning, to each other earlier, it's very reminiscent of somebody like Greg Araki as well. And, the French New Wave. And, so I am really curious, or we're both curious, what made you go into film? And how early did you know you wanted to be an artist? And
I was like this big. When I did that. I always wanted to make stuff, and like as a kid, even like with old school like camcorders, I would consistently tape my entire family, even like discreetly. They wouldn't be paying attention. That sort of stuff. And then like the older I got, I was like, I kind of figured it out on my own. I was like, I can edit these using 2 VCRs.
yes.
So
Old
yeah,
school.
and then I was like super. Yeah. Then I found out that I had a really hard time paying attention in class. I'm better like I'm more self-taught than anything. It's hard for me to really pay attention when someone's showing me something in school.
Yeah.
So when I found out that I could actually get away with doing essays, for example, or getting away with not really answering tests correctly by making videos instead.
Yeah.
And they saw that that's something that I like to do. My grades started getting a lot better. So, yeah, so that's what I gravitated towards. And then like creative writing, I think I was like in first grade or second grade or something like that. So then I was like, this is really fun. And I like that they actually gave me a nice tap on the shoulder for doing that, And I was
That's
like, I
really
like that.
good.
And then I was like, I can invent stories. And at the time, I just, also as a kid, just consistently playing with action figures.
Yeah.
I think, and this is like, I don't think I've ever really talked about this before, but I think up until like maybe I was 13, I already had a girlfriend at the time, my first ever girlfriend. I was playing with action figures and like making up these stories, but I would write stuff down. I wouldn't tape it. And then eventually I got like a school friend to help me like actually control the figures. And then I would, videotape everything and make stories like that. So it's something that's always been ingrained,
Yeah.
It's like animation.
Sure.
Though,
Yeah.
So were there just cameras, like did your parents have cameras or something? Were the
Just
cameras
old
around the
school
house?
from like
or?
Sears, old school big ass things that you had to carry with like
VHS.
total
Yeah.
VHS. And then the mini cam, like towards like 94, 95, we had one of those. And then I was just like, having a field day. But I also got into a lot of trouble as a kid because, after a while I was like, I could also tape my friends doing a bunch of pranks,
no
So
way.
I did a lot of that. Unfortunately, those videos were confiscated by the police, so I don't have access to them, including a lot of the action figure videos. They were all,
Really?
they were all taken away.
Is there like freedom of information, request?
I know. Who knows? Or maybe they were giving back to our parent. We were arrested for vandalizing, and maybe our parents got them back and just destroyed them or something. I have no idea. So I still have like my parents, maybe like, or my my dad passed away in 2018, but maybe shortly after that or right before that, my mom had given me this gigantic like tin box that had all the VHS like mini tapes that I had consistently taped over and over and over on. Wow. So I'm wondering if maybe something snuck in there. I have no idea. But I haven't made the time to actually go through them all. And I was trying to maybe do that during lockdown.
Yeah.
And I put on one tape and it was like from like 1995, 96, something like that. And I was like peeking through this crack in the door to my dad's office. My dad's office was literally next door to the house that I grew up in. He ended up converting this garage into kind of like a like a waiting room, but also had his big screen TV. So like at the end of the night, like when he would close his office, that was our living room technically. My mom had a different living room that you couldn't step in, and it was for like the guests. And I'm like, what guests? We never had any guests. Don't go in there, it's for the guests. You know, she didn't sound like that. She was Cuban. But anyway, so we had this whole room, and that was like the waiting room that his clients would stay in. So between that garage waiting room, it's his door, right? And there's like this crack, and I saw this and I was like, what is this video? And I'm like moving around. I can't tell what's going on. And I'm peering through there and taping him. And he, you know, when he would get wasted, which is a lot of time, he had all of his friends gathered in his office, and he was reciting poetry and really violently and really passionately. And I'm like taping the whole thing, and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot about this incident, you know, or whatever. So I've been meaning to, obviously not really pushing myself to do it, but been meaning to go through all those tapes and maybe compile this crazy like family home video thing, because there's so much footage, just so much footage. And unfortunately, like I said, I taped over a lot of it throughout the years. You know?
Yeah. But the angle, so you're just like looking through like a doorway into this room with your
and I could see him. I'm like, oh my God, he would totally do that all the time, because he always loved being the center of attention, you know, and he had this presence to him, and he always had to be right about everything, but he would recite poetry. I later found out that he actually had authored a book in Cuba, which I don't know much about and haven't really inquired, but wow. So it's interesting. But yeah, moving forward with that stuff, there was one day that it was just like raining, and it was a beautiful rainy day, and I taped like hours and hours of raindrops hitting the ground. I'd be by by like a ditch, you know, taping water flowing. You know, and I ended up cutting it to music. And I ended up, I think I used like a Smashing Pumpkins song in the band Bush at the time, because I was really into Bush back when I was a kid.
Which Smashing Pumpkins
Oh my God,
song?
I can't even remember.
Do you remember which Bush song?
I can't even remember that. It was something off, it was something off 16 Stone for sure. But I can't remember. But I remember it was the first time that I fused like music and images. Cool. And like no one really taught me how to do that. Just like instinctually did it. Yeah. But I wish I still had that super pretentious. Like,
I mean, it's so funny because that stuff is actually pretty authentic though. Because you know, you're just
I ended up like
to it, and you do it.
It's not pretentious if you mean it.
Right. I ended up taking independent studies eventually when I was supposed to be in high school, and they let me do whatever I wanted to do. So instead of like I said before, instead of doing these crazy writing assignments, you know, I would make short films with other school students, and they gave me good grades because of that.
That's amazing that they let you do that.
I don't know if I learned anything, but...
Yeah, well, you learn to make films.
We learned to make films, yeah. I'm sure you learned as well. Like, I feel like education should be a little bit more experimental. It's really stupid the way it's done.
I think life should just be experimental. You find your voice or yourself or whatnot.
Totally.
I love the prankster stories, because it's like, I feel like you just... that spirit is just in your films, you know.
It totally is.
Like just Gonzo, just downtown when we're making, you know.
Oh, definitely Wayside and like, Ditch have that, you know, that insanity to them.
Yeah.
And also, like the voyeurism in a weird way of like just, I mean, filmmaking is so voyeuristic, you know. It's
100%. I mean, like when I'm out and about in public, I'll sometimes catch myself staring at people. And then I'm like, oh, this isn't a movie. They can see what I'm doing. So I look like a creep right now. You know? So that's an issue that I have to, you know, kind of overcome. But anyhow, Also, you know, the classic film Peeping Tom, you guys familiar with, you know, really leans into that. But yeah, the voyeuristic, you know, it's like I have that in my movies. I have this whole like hangout aspect. I want you to hang out with these characters. Most of my favorite movies aren't really plot driven; they're story driven. But you're hanging out with these people.
Yeah,
you know, you might not like them, but you're hanging out with them.
Which is also like there's a really strong character element in your films. You know, that they feel character driven as well. Like you want to see what's happening with this person and where did they end up and what did they do, and you know
that was a nice part about doing Wayside, which we made it 12 years ago, and then doing a follow-up film, and I still wouldn't call it a sequel. I don't want to call it a sequel. We're not following a formula. You know, that first movie is very cut and paste. It's kind of like a collage. And, you know, 24 hours where these characters just, you know, abandon all responsibilities and go have a good time, right? So it's like, but I want to know what happened to these people later on in life. So 12 years later, we're making it's a different format, right, for that follow-up. But it's mainly to showcase how that night affected them later on in life.
Yeah.
So... if you're really interested in the characters and to see where people.
I mean, that was really magical. Actually, we went to see that screening, and just seeing those two films,
Yeah, just to have the actors come back and,
it was really magical.
There's a sense that, I mean, there's the characters as like the page, but it's the characters, it's the actors as well, like the actors who have changed in those 12 years.
Exactly.
All that. Yeah, it's the evolution of character, but it's character that's feels like both on the screen and beyond the screen, on the page and beyond the page.
Yeah, definitely.
It spills out into real life.
That's a fun experiment with that.
I mean, also that screening, it did spill out into real life because all the actors were
right.
there.
And some scenes were shot at that actual theater.
Yeah,
so you're like, what is going on?
Yeah, there's the characters playing the other characters.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, you're an actor in
See, but I don't consider myself an actor. I just appear my stuff.
You're I
happen to be like, when we did Watch Them Come Blood, there's a character that I play, and I had to step into that character's shoes. I think it was the day of, because the person that I cast completely dropped out. Oh, it could have been the day before or something like that. And I was like, I can't call anyone to do this thing right now. Like, no one's available. How are they going to pull this shit off? Like, I'm already on set. Now I have to remember all this dialogue. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I feel like sometimes I suffer from that because I'm like, or like the movies suffer because I'm in them because I don't have a grasp on the character or anything like that, aside from like my own personal ideas. But it's like, I didn't get a gel in that character's mind like that, where I'm going to actually portray this person to the audience or whatever. Yeah. So, but I wind up, a lot of the times. With Wayside, it was a lot different because, it was like I'm making a movie with like my best friends. All people who I bonded with through making movies. And that character is also like what let me get away with it is that, we're improvising the way that we shoot it. We're improvising pretty much where the story is headed. Yeah. And that was just with that movie. But he's a documentarian, so that's why that allows my character in that flick to consistently ask people questions or push them. But what was really going on when we were shooting that, it's like I'm hanging out with the characters like this, we're filming, and I'm like running behind Jessica, our DP, and going over there, and then I'm running over here, and then whispering in this actor's ear, I'm like, say this line, now go over there. And then it's just like building it that way. And then at night for that movie, whenever we were wrapped, I would go and edit all that footage.
Oh,
and then I'd be like, and then type up where we're going next and be like, this is where we're going next. These are the lines that you have to hit. This is a relationship dynamic and so on. And practically we made up everything as we went along for that specific movie.
Wow.
But
that's awesome. I mean, you can feel that energy,
I hope that energy is captured in
it. It is.
And I know at the beginning of that movie when people sit down, especially when you're watching it on a big screen like that, where it's like the camera, it's very cinema verite and it has that whole jump cut feel to it. And more so in the beginning, there's a lot of zooms that zoom in, zoom out. So we're 20 minutes later into the movie, it settles. I know a lot of people get incredibly nauseous and have to leave. And during that screening, I had friends that'd be like, dude, I love you, but I can't watch the fucking thing on the screen right now. I'm like, actually, I'm going to vomit.
It's so funny because I completely, until you just said this right now, I completely forgot that I got nauseous too.
Oh, you got nauseous? Wow.
Yeah. Did you get nauseous too?
I did for that one.
I had friends that were like sitting in the very front row. And usually when I'm at the LF3, I tend, not all the time, but I tend to sit in the front. I'm just like, leaning back and watching this movie. I'm like, I would not recommend that for that movie.
Yeah. But the thing is, it did just settle, and it just, I don't know, I don't even remember being nauseous now. Which is
it's like it's the first 20 when we're still figuring out how exactly we're going to present the story. But
it's got a lot of energy to it that it doesn't feel like it's not meant to be that way, if that makes sense. It just still feels like part of the flow of the energy of the film. And
it's really good cinematography as well. Like it's really like expressive and dynamic, and
she's really good.
Yeah.
Have you worked with her for a long time?
Yeah, since I think we met in 2007, and then we shot it's an aborted first feature. I never completed it. It's called Scenes from Oblivion, and I've been meaning to go back. I keep saying this all the time, but I'm gonna be meaning to go back and re-edit it into a short, because the characters, it's like basically it has to deal with like my Cuban heritage a bit, and then like this guy who's really like conservative or whatever meets like this girl who's working, and she's being professional, working at this job and whatnot, and he falls head over heels for her, and then they run into each other 2 years later, and he's like, oh my God, and I'm asking you on a date, and she complies, but she's a punk rocker. And he's like, what the hell is this? So he's like, well, I'm really close to my like Catholic upbringing and my Cuban family. And she's like, well, I'm not close to my family. And these are this is my family. It's just a bunch of punk characters.
Yeah.
And those characters pretty much, you know, it's like the first thing I'd ever like really made. I was gonna say professionally. I'm not gonna use that word, but anyway, like the first thing I'd actually made that wasn't like, you know, taping a bunch of friends running around like with, you know, like chickens with their heads cut off.
Yeah.
So with this stuff, it's just like, yeah, it was almost my full blown film school, and I messed up so much, and it's not great. It's not even good. It's nothing. It's just crap, right? But those characters were so awesome and so fun that while I was working that, I immediately wrote a spin-off pilot to showcase those characters. Cut to several months later. And we started a web series called Oblivion, which features those characters. There were 22-minute long episodes, and then that's what Jessica worked on. And so basically, going back to how I met Jessica, when I put up an ad for Scenes from Oblivion, I was like, oh, this is the story, and it's about these punk rock characters. She responded, and she's like, well, I've shot a lot of punk rock shows. She's from Cleveland.
Yeah.
And she's like, I shot the Dead Kennedys and this and that, blah, 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 blah. I'm working on this Drop Dead Dark Wave documentary. So she's like, you know, like death rocker. And she's like, I still dye my hair with Manic Panic. I have bright red hair. She shows up and I was like, she's one of us, you know?
Yeah.
So when I was like, hey, I'm going to do this whole spin-off series, she's like, I'm in. And so we, you know, I initially shot the pilot, like half of it, like a quarter of it, I shot it. I had someone else named Anastasia Shepard that shot the majority of that pilot. Jessica did some pickup shots, and then she stuck on board to do the rest. And it's like that whole Oblivion became our family, you know?
Yeah.
Like everybody. And that's how I became really close to a lot of people that to this day are still in my stuff. And that was 2009, I think, that we started that.
Yeah.
So we did it for like 3 years, and we did like 4 seasons, and the fourth one I have never released. So people haven't seen footage from like stuff that they shot, you know, back then or whatever. But
Are you planning to release it?
Something always happens, and I have to like reconstruct those episodes. I don't want to get too far into it, but like about a week before I was gonna release them, this is when I was shooting Watch Them Come Blood, something bad happened, and I'm like, I have to start from scratch. And at that point, I was working on all these movies. And now that those movies are done, I'm like, oh, I maybe have the time to do that. But because those are 7 movies, I've written so much music that I have 7 albums worth of music to put out. So I gotta do that, and I'm like, oh, fuck the music. It's in the movies. Who cares? But I'm also like, hey, I worked on this stuff. People should listen to them, and even if they don't, at least they're out there in the world and not just rotting away on a hard drive.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems like he started, right out the gate with experimenting and creating your own videos and your video essays and all of that stuff. Was there at any point like this sense of like having inspirations or specific influences that came into play that drove things along for you, or that still inspire you to this day maybe?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, well, initially it was just like, I just, growing up, though, without going too far into my backstory, like by the time my parents had me, my brothers were about to get married. So, and they're really close in age. So they didn't want to deal with me, so they just sat me in front of a TV. And so I got obsessed with watching, like, whatever, Ninja Turtles, for example, the old school cartoon series from the 80s. And so every episode, not every episode, but most episodes were like, to be continued. And I'm like, oh my God. So I got obsessed with storytelling. And then my eldest brother, Angel, he was always trying to get me into sports and this and that. And I didn't really I collected baseball cards and stuff like that, but I wasn't really like gravitating towards it. I don't really consider myself a competitive person unless it's with myself. So I don't really care about that, or like, people winning awards. I don't care about that stuff. So he's like, there's something wrong with this kid. But he saw that I was really into like these storytelling and this and that. And the X-Men cartoon had just come out. And he's like, well, I'm a comic book collector, because my brother collects a bunch of stuff. He doesn't necessarily read those comics, but he collected them. So he took me to my first comic book convention. He took me to my first comic book store. And I was like, oh, serialized storytelling. And it's all this shared universe stuff. And so I was getting really, really into that stuff. So that was an inspiration to try to tell the stories. I initially wanted to be a comic book artist, but I can't draw at all whatsoever. I got like this whole like drawing board, a desk, everything, and I'm like, it didn't pan out. It didn't work out with me. But I was like, but I still knew I could make up stories all the time. So like, and I talk about this a lot now, but being a kid that consistently hung out at the mall, that collected comic books, that my parents would just drop me off on Saturdays, for example, and I would like plan this whole itinerary out of the movie theater.
Yeah.
Because at the time, they don't have that now, but you could see the show times
Yeah.
for every movie, you know, or you call it movie phone and be like, this is when this starts, you know,
Yeah.
jingle all the way at 7. So I would plan the whole day out with friends. We never ate.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No one ate popcorn or hot dogs, nothing like that. We just went from like early in the morning and watched every goddamn movie we could on that Saturday.
Yeah.
But I mainly hung out at the mall. I mainly collected comic books. We all did, and we played a lot of video games. So lo and behold, one day, I was like, wait, who makes all these comic book characters? Oh, Stan Lee. I go into Blockbuster Video, and there's a poster for this movie called Mallrats. And on that
I was
poster,
going to ask you about
for
Mallrats. Yeah.
there's a photo of Stan Lee or a drawing of Stan Lee or whatever. And I was like, Stan Lee's in this movie? I got to see this movie. So every day I come in, hey, you guys got Mallrats yet? Not yet, kid. Not for 3 months. You guys got, not yet. You guys got, and then I got Mallrats, and I was like, man, these characters talk a lot. And I was like, but I still thought it was so funny. I didn't really understand what the hell they were talking about, but I thought it was hilarious. And Jason Lee like blew me away in that movie. And I'm like, I relate to that guy. I too walk around the mall with a little cup that I fill at McDonald's with soda all day. And so I got obsessed with that flick. And then I watched Clerks, and I was like, this guy writes movies like my friends talk.
Yeah.
You know, and so on. And then you get into Tarantino and all that. And it's like, it just opened this floodgate of like, wow, I relate to these characters or these movies or these people talk about things that we talk about.
Yeah.
So that opened the floodgate. And then obviously Tarantino, you know, holds his influences on his sleeve. I checked that stuff out.
Yeah.
Kevin Smith did the same thing. He loved John Hughes. I started watching John Hughes movies. And I was like, oh my God, I got into punk rock. And I was like, it'd be cool if I were able to someday like fuse John Hughes style with like punk.
Yeah.
And like so on and so forth. And then you know, whatever, you find out about Cassavetes, the French New Wave, and I just kept getting older and getting to more music, and like the whole scope opens up. So everything from that point on, including, I can't talk about a certain filmmaker who's been shamed, but those movies really, really, really affected me. So I was like, I always wanted to make stuff that other people like me could watch and feel less alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was like the whole MO. Like, I hope these jokes make you laugh. I hope like you relate to something in these characters. Or like my first movie, Jerry, my first official movie, Jerry. Maybe you're as angry as this character. So it's always been that thing.
Yeah.
You know? And now it's been more like, how can I do all that and also like you know, like with Watch Them Come Blood, since I tend to make, people keep asking me what kind of movies you make, and I just go philosophical comedies.
Yeah.
People go, what the fuck is that, philosophical comedies? I'm like, the characters philosophize and like they're funny. They're still comedies to me.
Yeah.
They have a lot of dramatic moments, but they're still comedies.
Yeah.
You know? With Blood, it's still funny, but it's really messed up. It's really dark. It's really twisted.
Yeah.
Also, if you follow the way I've been speaking, I speak really in a non-linear sense.
Yeah.
That's how the movies are as well. Even like Wayside does that for like a trick. You're watching the movie, it's obviously chronologically, but then it pauses at one moment, something happens, and then it rewinds.
Yeah.
I recall that.
Yeah.
Ditch doesn't have that, but like most of my stuff is very out of order.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna say that's like a Pulp Fiction influence, but that people always bring that up, and I'm like, no, that's just how I've always spoken. I've always talked like that. I bring up this point, but I want to give you some backstory on that point.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump to all these different topics, and you just gotta be patient and trust me. We're gonna get back to the original purpose of this thing. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, also that's kind of how memory works.
sure. Yeah.
And
I'm obsessed with memory, so I have
Yeah.
that. That's like a linear thing throughout almost everything I've done. It's just memory.
Yeah.
It's
How
like
we
we don't-
reinvent them. How.
That's it. Yeah, we don't remember things in the linear. I mean, I feel like we think of ourselves. We like to give ourselves a chronology.
Yeah.
But it's not really real. You know, it's an illusion. Like film kind of gives us that. But as humans, we can never get that because memory is not linear, and the way the subconscious is not anyway.
100%. Yeah.
And like, I think, like the kinds of movies that you make, you know, just the way there's like, it's characters hanging out, you know, and there's a sense, like it feels nostalgic, you know, like I think there's something inherently nostalgic about film, but particularly films, you know, particularly your films, just because it's like a sense of like, oh, we're seeing these moments in their life. So yeah, having that
makes
kind
me
of
stoked that you feel that way because I
Definitely.
feel like I'm a nostalgic person, and it's also because it's like, again, it goes into rewriting your own memories. Even you can say with film, and you know, I forget the exact quote, which is like, film is truth, you know, frames per second. it's like, but it's not, because people go like, oh, I already watched that movie. I'm like, no, you watched it 4 or 5 years ago when you were a different person. You had different opinions. So if you ask somebody like, oh, how was the movie? If you go to like a revival theater or a repertory theater and go watch something that you watched like 10 years ago. And if you come back to me and if I ask you how was that movie, you're like, oh, it's the same. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm like, unless you're the same, you're stuck in like, stuck in this pit this entire time and have not grown as an individual, because you're going to notice different things. You might side with other characters. You might understand. It's like also like, I watched like Some Kind of Wonderful a few days ago at the Beverly, and Eric Stoltz's character is like pretty much throwing away his college fund and this and that, for this girl or whatever. And when I watched that when I was younger, I was like, yeah, fuck this dad, whatever he has to say. Yeah. And then you're like, nah, dude, maybe you should listen to him. I mean, mind you, he wants you to go to college for something that you do not want to do, so that's understandable. Go and fight that. I totally applaud that. But also, like, don't throw it for some girl. You're like 17 or 18 or whatever how old he is. He's 18, he says that. Yeah. So I'm like, don't do that, But so you change, and also you'll notice different things. You notice different shots. I mean, even in my own stuff, no one's seen my movies more than me. I've seen them more times than I've ever cared to see them. Like, I just want to wipe them from my memory. But every time I do watch something, and especially with an audience, I'm just like, I notice things that subconsciously I put in there. Yeah. Or something that an actor does, a tick or something like that, and then like that'll just spiral into all these different millions of thoughts I'll have after that. So I think it's always interesting, just like memories constantly being reinvented. Perspectives, all that sort of stuff. Even me, like, telling you how I got into movies and bringing up Kevin Smith stuff, I'm like, that's how I see it. It could have been something totally different. Yeah. Who fucking knows? Yeah. Scream was a big movie for me as a kid. You're like watching that, and like, again, people talk like how my friends and I talk, all these pop culture references. Yeah. And you're like, who's that killer? This is really fun. And then you get involved into like getting into like, how can I trick an audience when I'm telling a story? How can I make a Kevin Smith type of movie? And also like pull a wool over the audience's eyes, and also fall into misdirection, which is also a Hitchcocking thing. I was a huge Hitchcock fan when I was like 12, 13, so on. So it's like things like that. I don't know. I don't know. I might be making this all up. I don't even know.
No, I mean, I think that's super cool. Like, just, I mean, it's just funny you saying that, because we just watched Dream a Little Dream not long ago. Yeah. And I'm like, God, I relate to the old people. Like, these kids are fucking assholes. Yeah. Like,
it's crazy.
Fuck these kids.
It's totally crazy when your perspective alters and you're like, what the hell? Yeah. Like,
but also, like, I binge watch everything. Like, I watch everything a million times. And I feel like every time I do, feel free to edit this out too, Christian. Every time I do, it's like, I've seen Buffy, for example, like maybe 300-400 times, and I watch Gilmore Girls to fall asleep at night, because they live in like this fantasy land that's like really comfy. And like, I ask myself every night, how can I keep fucking watching this? And it's just like, no, every time I watch it, it's like, I see it new. And I've never heard anyone talk about this before. So I feel like I really like this being the angle that you're taking with this, because I think it's really important in today's age where people are binge watching things more frequently because of streaming services and stuff like that there's like a psychological value to this, because you get to like re-experience these stories over and over again as a new person. So as much as you might grow as a person, you get to experience the art grow as well. Like the art has its own entity, is its own entity that continues to mean more and more over time. It goes
further past like the artist that created it, Yeah. And it depends. Like, I'll bring up that first movie, Jerry. There were times like, I'm like in and I'm making this movie, and it's like this technically, someone asked me, they're like, oh, is Watching Come Bloody your first genre movie? I'm like, my first genre movie is my first movie, which is a crime comedy. Yeah. And it leans into this whole thing. Yeah. But, I know when I was writing it, I had this intent, and you create it and it becomes a whole nother thing, and then you're editing it, becomes a whole nother thing, and then like you go and watch it and it becomes a totally different thing, and it depends who you're watching at, the audience, and so on and so forth. And then like some time passed, and I watched it with the DP Ammo. And Joey, who's the lead, he's in all my stuff, but we watched it this one particular time, and they were like, man, this movie's like, I never realized this movie's really about friendship. I think that's in most of my stuff anyway, but it's like, it's about friendship. Yeah. And then later on when I watch it, I'm like, oh, this movie's about trust issues. It's still about friendship, but it's about trust issues. Yeah. Not about not even trusting yourself, because this character has like, he's an unreliable narrator who is consistently reinventing his own memory. Yeah. So that's already in there. So it's like, how can you actually trust yourself in the things that you've actually gone through? Or even, let's say, if you were totally inebriated.
Yeah.
Certain things that you said. You're going to argue and say you didn't say those things, but then you have a room full of 20 people that are going like, no, dude, you took your pants off over your head. Or tried to and fell down. You know? So I think that's really fascinating. Just like just reinventing oneself. And like how movies and like art take their own form and whatnot, you know?
Yeah.
So that's also like the really fun part of like, when I watch something that really knocks my socks off. Sometimes... someone will be like, oh, so how'd you feel about that movie?
Yeah.
And I'll be like, oh, it was fucking rad. What happens? And I'm like, I don't know what happens in it, but I know that it made me feel a certain way.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm like, I know, like, certain albums, there's so much music now, you're so, like, inundated with music, but I know that when I listen to something that, like, I'll be, like, obsessively listening to one album.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 years pass by. I can't really even remember, like, the song titles, but I just know that I love that album. I know it's awesome, and maybe, like, cherishing the moment to not revisit it just yet. But I can recommend it, but I can't tell you why.
Yeah,
you know? Not specifically why, you know?
I mean, I think that's an interesting thing too, like where music and art is like the language of emotion. You know, like words can be the language of information, but music and art on the other side of the brain are like just like the language of the abstract and the language of emotion. And I feel like that's the power, is that you can't even explain what it's about, because once you explain what it's about, you've given it like time and space. But if you're not able to do that, it's about so much more. It's about this abstract kind of energy, archetypal energy, maybe emotive energy, like just something that is living and breathing and constantly changing.
And it's also like an individual experience where, like, you can agree, let's use a movie like Titanic, which, you know, made $1 gazillion and everybody watched it, and maybe most people cried toward the end of the movie or whatever. So it has this universal blanket feeling. But then there's stuff that even like, I don't know if you guys seen Honora recently.
I haven't seen it yet.
So I'm not going to go too far into that. But when you have a movie like that where like the ending of a movie or something that happens in the movie, someone can praise it and then someone can watch it and feel totally like numb to the experience because that person maybe has not gone through something that occurs in the flick that you yourself have or dealt with, or know someone that you're very close with that went through something, so you've been exposed to this thing. And it's a reflection. So some people go like, oh, this person's always overrating stuff. I'm like, well, you don't have that person's life experiences. Or like how a certain chord progression gives you shivers. That just gave me shivers seeing that. But anyway, you can't see because I'm wearing a jacket. But yeah, like that where it specifically speaks to a person, you know? And there's some people that get really upset when a whole group of people maybe relate to something and they go, I just don't get it. I'm like, well, you're not them. You know? It's not to like,
it's okay.
It's okay. We're not trying to push it aside or like make it some sort of castaway and be like, oh, you don't get it, you're an idiot. It's not about that. It's about like full blown like emotion and like attraction to something, because there's certain movies that I absolutely like love. From like, I put it on and 2 minutes in, the cinematography, the tone of it, the music, it just goes. But I sometimes I go like, I would never recommend this movie to anybody else because they're not going to experience this. And then people go like, what does that mean? I'm like, it's not a challenge. I'm just telling you that it's like something that speaks to me. It's something in there may remind me of something from my childhood, a feeling, some like maybe I was in a park one day and the sunlight hit a blade of grass and the breeze was blowing perfectly in some shape, way, or form, whatever perfectly is. And you're like, I am totally in sync. And I watched this movie that caught that. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't explain it. So it's like,
I relate so much to that. That's it's so weird how we have to classify things as good or bad, or right or wrong, like correct or incorrect when it's art. It's a reflection. It's either the reflection.
It's too emotional for that, you know. That's why I don't believe in film criticism and all that stuff.
So stupid.
I can watch an Ed Wood movie and get more like I don't know, maybe merit or like emotional resonance than like say watching a Christopher Nolan movie. But that's a matter of opinion. Yeah, technically great filmmaker. I'm not a Christopher Nolan fan. Those movies leave me really cold. But I can watch something like a Jack Hill movie or a Roger Corman movie and be like floored by it. You know, because it's just like what you relate to, what you like, how it filters through your system and whatnot, you know.
And like he said, there's the blade of grass like that exists forever in your psyche, that this thing is reflecting in this moment. That's like pure magic. You're not going to get that easily.
Totally. And that's, I think, like for like maybe certain filmmakers that are trying to capture that one thing, and and they're like, there's this thing inside of me, and I'm trying to capture it, and like you watch the movie, and you're like, I failed, I didn't get it right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like that, and you're like, God damn it, man. I wish I could try to like show other people what this emotion is, what this thing is. But again, it's really difficult because they haven't gone through those experiences. And also it's really difficult to recreate something.
Yeah.
You know, or like the thing that, you know, like the daunting aspect about sequels as well.
Yeah.
You know? Trying to capture that magic in a bottle again or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like we've already kind of gone into this a little bit as we've been talking, but, is there like a process for you in filmmaking? Do you start with the script, or do you start with the idea, or do you start with the emotion, or does everything work in tandem, you know, all the time as far as like process goes?
It'll be like, I can talk about the past or like presently. There's two different things where right now I'm like, man, I want to make a movie like that, but with my style.
Yeah.
And do that. So that's really exciting. So I have this really cool idea. Let me see if I can run away with it. Or try to actually evolve as well. Yeah. So there's that now. But like with certain things, it's just like when I did the Boys About Town series, which is like we wrapped last spring. Yeah. And it's a 4-parter. Technically, it's one whole movie. Yeah. My tribute to French New Wave. It's like a Godardian style movie, but with the heart of a Truffaut, because Godard is very... Yeah. You know? Yeah. So it has the heart of a Truffaut. And also like my full blown influences. I have actually title card at the beginning of the films where I thank these filmmakers. So I do thank Kevin Smith. I thank my really good friend China Cluxon Flores. Yeah. Who does the Blue Monday comics. The Hernandez brothers who do Love and Rockets. Yeah. But it has Truffaut, Godard, Agnes Varda is on there. And I was like, I want to make my version of a French New Wave movie, but obviously I'm not French, but I'm like, I have my background, so I wanted to be about music, and I had a feel of like masculine, feminine, also Band of Outsiders. It's also a hangout movie, but and this is before like I even learned about Boyhood, because I came up with this like the day that I finished writing the Oblivion pilot. I started writing Boys About Town, so this is like way back in 08 or 09 or whatever, 08 actually. And I was like, I want them to be vignettes, and we're following these 2 young boys who are like 20 years old, and we're going to follow them through like 5-6 years of their lives, and I'm going to shoot them in real time. But it was meant to be only one movie. Wow. And then I was like, maybe it should be just like a web series or just like shorts that are released on the internet. Yeah. It ended up becoming this 4-part film series. So the inspiration for that was like, I want to make that kind of movie. Yeah, I want to try that. I don't want to make every movie look like that, but I'm like, I want to try that because I really love Truffaut and Godard, but I also like want to like filter it through my own aesthetics. Yeah. So let me do this thing, and I wanted to be like, you know, I love indie comic books, and a lot of them are in black and white, so I wanted that sort of feel. Yeah. And you know, without jumping too far into this, like that movie series is technically the worst stuff I've made from like total technical standpoint. It really feels like it's like the most no budget shit I've ever done. Like raw, no budget, pure, but it's like, but I like it in that sense because it is youthful. You're following these young characters. They're a little naive. Yeah. They haven't gone through a lot of things. One of them is incredibly sex obsessed. The other one doesn't have a lot of sexual experience. They're both music obsessives, but I wanted to have that feel. So in that sense, I feel like I was successful in capturing micro, no budget cinema. Some of the stuff is really poorly lit, but I think that's part of the charm of it. Yeah. You know, especially in comparison when I'm like, I'm going to be putting this out, but then I watch Blood and it's like shot really well, and like Jessica lit incredibly well, and it's like, it just looks really cool. Yeah. And then going back to this and you're like, dude, what the hell? But it's cool because of that. It's just like the inspiration. I'm like, I want to do that. Yeah. You know? You know, when I, or like we're like Wayside, it was more like I was gonna make this movie that at the time was called Zoran Desire. It's one of my like, you know, one of the films that I've never been able to make that's like something that I would really care about creating. Like I make the stuff that I can make. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily mean that like I'm like this is like my dream project. It's like, no, I can make this and I want to do this. Cool. I want to make everything that I've made, but like the stuff that I really like wholeheartedly like passionately love, that I've worked on scripts that I've written, I dare not make in our style. I need a major budget for that stuff, and I'd rather not make it than fuck it up, you know, because I will fuck it up. So I really want to like capture my vision. So there's that inspiration where it's like, okay, I want to create something, and this is what we can do. So I couldn't make Zora. All this stuff like led up to it. I nearly got Tom Waits to be the narrator for this movie. It's like this kind of like a fantasy time travel ghost story. It's like Y tu mamá también meets Amelie. Blah, 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 blah. We shot like, you know, like a concept, like a proof trailer for it. When I premiered Jerry, I had the trailer at the very end, post credits. I think he was doing that before Marvel did. But anyway, this is what I'm going to work on next. These movies are all about memory. It's like a trilogy of movies about memory that I wanted to make. So that all fell apart. And I was like, shit, man, this sucks. And then already, when I watched Cassavetes' Shadows, that's what pushed me to actually go ahead and make my first movie.
Yeah.
Like literally, it was like Shadows, and I was like, I want to make my version of that.
Yeah.
So I ended up with my best friends. I ended up watching Cassavetes' Husbands. None of us really loved that movie, but we watched it and we were like, dude, we can make this movie. They made it, like no script.
Yeah.
We'll get fucked up. We'll shoot this movie and blah, blah. Yeah. So we ended up making By the Wayside. So that kind of inspiration where it's like, well, we can't make a movie anymore. So what with this money that we never got, so why don't we make something that we can make?
Yeah.
Jessica, can you shoot this? Yeah. And then she comes through and then we do this movie,
I mean,
so... Yeah, you build up,
Yeah.
And also, like, being a musician for so long, I was like, I'm not making movies anymore. For, like, 7 years, I just worked on Dignitary, my old band.
Wow.
And during one of these tours that we did in New York, we did this, like, 5 boroughs tour. We played every borough in New York. The experience of that, coming back, I took some bad cocktail of drugs. During that same week, I rewatched Nashville, the Robert Altman movie, and I rewatched Slacker, the Linklater movie, and I was like... And my friend China, who does the Blue Monday Con, she's like, you should make a movie about band life. I'm like, I'm not gonna fucking do it. You should make a movie about band life. I was like, what if I did this movie where it takes place at a post-punk music festival, but it's like Slacker, and we just follow each musician connecting to the other one throughout the whole day. I'm like, oh, it'd be great. And it'll be like, I'm gonna work on that movie, and I'm gonna take my experiences from this thing, and which didn't end up being that movie, ended up morphing into a whole other thing.
Yeah.
I didn't really go into like the how trivial it is to be a musician or like book a show and like, I'm gonna book the show. The promoter's like, how many people can you
oh my god.
Yeah, how many people follow you? And then it's like, wait, isn't your like, and then you go and you could play at this venue and the promoter doesn't really promote it, and then the booker wants you to book all the other musicians. I'm like, I thought that's your job.
Yeah.
So why am I doing all the legwork and figuring out everyone's time slots and then having the bands argue who's gonna like be open late?
Yeah.
Because that's not really the headliner. That's more like the head. You play it at like 10 or 11, and like the other band that's kind of discarded plays very, 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 very last. Dealing with that bullshit. And I was like, I want to capture this. I captured a little bit of it, but I didn't really go too far into that. So I was like, I'm going to make this movie. That, again, inspired me to keep going.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm just going to keep making more movies. And so on.
Yeah.
But that,
oh wow, cool! I want to see that though, because it's like PTSD.
That's all be around.
I need to process the PTSD. Of that.
Yeah, Jesus Christ! And with that movie in general, where I got most of the cast, and I'm rambling now, but where I got most of the cast to work on that thing is because a lot of the people either were musicians already, or were musician actors, or are actors, and they know what it's like to hustle.
Yeah.
And they're like, holy shit! They read that thing, they're like, I relate to this. Like, this is what I talk about, with my friends all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the themes of okay, it's going to ask this a little bit better. So we have touched on this as well, a little as we've been talking, themes of trust, themes of friendship, themes of nostalgia and memory. So would you say these are the central themes of your work? And, is there a message within it, or is it just like emotional territory that you like exploring? Or is there something that you're wanting to like convey to an audience through the process of that? Or like,
It's weird. It's like, can you, I don't know if maybe when I was younger, I was like, oh, maybe I can have people think differently.
Yeah.
Or reconsider certain things, but you don't want to force anybody into anything. Like if I had kids, which I don't ever imagine. I already have kids. They're called my movies. Yeah. I wouldn't be like, hey, you should listen to this, this punk rock album. Just listen to this Crass album. This and that. Like, you wouldn't want to force that. It's kind of like figure it out on your own. If you hear me playing it and you dig it, cool. Yeah. So you kind of learn to be more humble about those things. But I do delve into personal identity and freedom, and it's just like I said, like we were talking about earlier, go experiment. Go figure yourself out. Yeah. See what you dig. See what you, whatever. And also and it's like, we have these crazy constraints in life, and, it's like live in the moment. Enjoy what you can while you can. And go into, and I bet, again, I'm not incredibly close with my family. Yeah. And I built my own family with these friends of mine, and we bicker, and we've known each other for over a decade, and, we have all this, we may not have every single thing in common, but it's like these are people that I know that I can rely on, and they've been there, and I'm like, they know me pretty well, and vice versa. We've changed so much, but at the same time, our core being is still there. You know, sure, we all have people like that in our lives.
Yeah.
So, so I value that. So
Yeah.
showing friendship, and then also like the trusting. Can you trust yourself? Our memories, everything like that. I'm like, I don't know if I'm specifically trying to convey some sort of message, but it's just stuff that's always on my mind. And they always say this about certain filmmakers. They're like, oh, why you're gonna go watch so and so's movies? They just keep making the same movie every time. I'm like, isn't that what every artist does? You're trying to figure something out. You're like, maybe this time I'll be able to like get those puzzle pieces locking or unlock that one box. You know, you're constantly like experimenting to see if you can, I don't know, like break that mold and learn something. There's something in there that's bugging you. So I always found that really fascinating about certain artists, even though I may not relate to that material.
Yeah.
I just kind of want to, like, I get a kick out of seeing you trying to figure that out. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
So it's always really cool. If you watch, like, Paul Thomas Anderson movies, he always has something to do with a father figure.
Always.
Yeah. So that's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
You know? And then you go into his history and whatnot, and you're like, okay, I'm really curious why you have that there. Be it like Burt Reynolds' character in Boogie Nights, or obviously Daniel Day and There'll Be Blood and so on. You know, there's always that, and that's fascinating. You know, so again, I don't know. Like, I don't really know myself that message, but it's like it falls back down into like, hey, like, I don't know, like, trying to find that person that, like, you know, one of the best compliments I actually had was from Wayside a while back. 2 separate people emailed me and they're like, hey, I really like your movie. I put it on anytime I feel alone. So it's like relating to it or feeling like, again, you're not alone in the world with your thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, with I'll Be Around, it's like, I hope you can relate to this, because I'm like, I still consider myself an underdog. I'm attracted to underdogs.
Yeah.
It's like you're still going to keep at it, at your art, no matter how much like life and like responsibilities on all these things just kick you down, or critics, everyone bashing anything that you do. And it's just like, I'm more like, let the kid do what he wants to do, you know? Let him, they want to like do these weird experiments, go for it, you know, whatever. And it's like, if you dig it, you dig it. If you can totally sync with it, cool. If you can't, I'm not going to like shame them or like bash them for that. I'm like, they're just figuring their own thing out. And that's always a fun part, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean, that's just like, to me, like a pure like punk aesthetic, or a pure, you know, like experimentation, live in the moment, try things out. There are no rules, like, you know, break those rules too. I feel like that's a feeling that,
Well, they always say like every story.
Communicated.
It's all like they always say every story's been told, but it's how you tell it.
Yeah.
So it's also how you tell it from this person's perspective. So like I'm taking like the mold of like Nashville and like Slacker, but let me do it this way, because this hasn't been done. Yeah. This music scene hasn't been focused on. Yeah. Or these sort of people haven't been focused on with this kind of humor, and then like my stuff is like a mix of high and lowbrow humor and like also situations. Yeah. Like I love incredibly campy, wacky moments, but I also love moments where you can hear like a pin drop. Yeah. You know? So it's mixing all these crazy, wild aesthetics and influences, and showing somebody like something that they haven't really seen before presented in that manner. This also falls into the non-linear, like misdirection thing. Yeah. You know? Which is really fun to me.
Yeah. And I think that your films have this like sense of melancholy to them as well, that I feel like cements the emotional process of watching it. Right. You know, which just makes
it's that John Hughes thing when they talk about where you have like you even have Ferris is a really fun movie, but then you have that scene with Cameron where he breaks down and you're like, shit, man, I love those real moments in movies, which because that's the end. Like even like I don't know how you guys.
It's surprising when it happens in your film all of a sudden out of the blue.
I don't know how you guys feel like when you like when you perform and you get off stage. Some people are like, I'm just like. I get really bummed out. Yeah. It's all this build up, and then you play this one show, and even if it goes well, it's like I get off stage and I'm just kind of like what's next, and I'm like, I don't know. It's like this existential dread. So it's like so even like at the end of the day, it's like this melancholy feeling is always there no matter what I do. Yeah. When I wake up, and I'm like, I'm not in the. It's like I'm not even grumpy. It's just kind of like this melancholy feeling, but I also love it. It's really comforting. Yeah. You know, and most of my favorite musical artists are like that. Yeah. They have like these really like I don't know triumphant moments, but at the end of the day, there's like this underlayer of sadness. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Yeah. I like that, but
I love that. Well, what have we got coming up for you? God.
So Watch Them Come Blood's been doing festivals. You did a premiere here.
It's funny to hear that title, just people saying casually. We don't
Watch Them Come Blood.
So that did its international run. It might still be playing out and about. We are in the process of booking it and touring it. I really want to take it to like major cities and hopefully build some sort of cult following, because I honestly think it's like a really fun movie to watch in theaters. It's a total midnight movie.
Yeah.
You want to watch it with a crowd. People that have asked me for screeners, like friends that couldn't make it to the screening because I don't know when it's going to show in LA again. I'm like, just make sure when you watch it, like turn the lights off. Watch it at night.
Yeah.
Just watch it at night and just like, and go along with it. Like I say, some people like and younger people like will complain. They're like, well, I wouldn't have told the story like that. And I'm like, then go make your own movie. I mean, honestly, you know, like, I'm like, you're annoyed that everything's out of order, but don't worry, like, chill, you know? Just chill out. Just watch the movie, just relax, man. Do you complain about that when you go on a roller coaster? No. It's going to go up and down. Like, just relax, you know? The second time you watch it, you're going to be like, oh, I get it now. You're going to see a lot of, like, seeds that we planted. So anyway, that movie, I highly, highly, highly recommend to watch it in theaters if you can.
Yeah.
But it is coming in a physical media. I'm not really allowed to say it because I was told not to talk about it anymore. But a boutique label is putting it out in July, physical, and I'm so stoked because I love that label, and I'm stoked to see the artwork and all the bonus features that we're going to toss on it are going to be really fun.
Awesome.
So that's really cool. Right now, Ditch, you guys came to that screening?
Yeah.
That is probably never going to screen again because that's a difficult movie for even to play at festivals because it's I don't want to use the word, but I'm going to use what they told me. It's a sequel to a movie no one's really seen.
Yeah.
Mind you, Wayside it's on the streaming service. You can catch it on Prime and Tubi and all that jazz. It's out there. So that it will be streaming next year, but it's not going to screen again. And I keep telling people, I'm like, you really do have to watch Wayside to appreciate this. You can watch this and you'll be a little lost, but to really feel a full-blown impact, because that movie deals with it, just getting older, loss, deals with regret, remorse, regret, all that stuff is in there. That movie is
so good.
It's a reflection of things, and it's also like chronologically with my movies, I think it fits right into that. And it's a love letter also to these people that helped me make movies throughout all these years. So I am hoping someone would put out a really cool Blu-ray set of Wayside in that, so you can watch them at your convenience back to back. That's the best way to do it. And Boys About 10, I'm trying to figure out how we're going to screen those. It's 4 movies that I technically say it's one whole movie to me. If you like you talking about Melancholia, that movie is it's very wacky. It's very fun. It's juvenile, but they do grow up during the span of the thing, and that Melancholia is definitely there, and I think resonates more than anything I've done aside from the very last movie in the streak of 7 movies, which is called Odium for Ardor, and that is my total there's only 2 people that have seen the whole thing, and one of them is Jessica, the DP, and she's like, because I asked her for any notes or anything like that, if we needed any pickups, she goes, this is unlike anything I've ever shot before.
Wow.
And she's like, I don't usually do art house stuff, and it's very much in that realm, but it's also I think that's the most me movie I've ever made. Wow. It's almost even though I seriously do not relate to the subject matter, it's just a story that I wanted to tell, and I wrote the script back in 2006. So when we shot this movie, and I was already on a roll. I actually shot it right before we did In the Ditch. So I'd done Blood. I've been shooting boys, sporadically for the last 6 years or so. And I was like, I should just make this movie because the cast is 4 or 5 people, unlike everything that I do that has 20 people, 30, 40, 50 people in it. This is a small cast, 2 or 3 locations. It's kind of like a play, but it's not. I don't want to change a word from when I wrote it back then, so I shot it just as is.
Wow.
And that's about this author who's going through this sophomore slump. They wrote this runaway novel, this huge hit, the Tickle Me Elmo of its time, if you want to call it that. And he's now holed up in a hotel room, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's got all these rabid fans out on the street, and he's dealing with this new story that he absolutely hates. He had to go through something to be able to create something so genuine with his past novel. So he's dealing with the characters in that, his own life experiences, and it's very surreal, and it keeps going through all these different worlds. And you don't even know if the story you're watching presently is even in his head.
Wow.
It's
cool.
really bizarre. But
Yeah.
it does go through, like, the beginning is very cartoonish, and then it gets really dour, and there's, like, a whole Bergman influence in that. And, yeah, and it changes aspect ratios and, like, tone, and you're just,
wow,
like, and it's
cool.
really, it's pretty sad.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad, but it's uplifting in a sense, you know?
I love that.
So that melancholy, I really started leaning into it toward the end of Boys About Town, and, you know.
And is that one
this
out?
book. It is not out. And I don't
Okay,
even.
so that's upcoming.
Yep.
It's like I call it a Christmas noir.
Okay.
But I wanted it to screen it this year, but it's not ready. So I don't know if
Okay.
I'll wait a whole nother year. I don't really know what I'm doing with that, but
Yeah.
I've taken my time with it. Because
Yeah.
right now, Boys About Town is like I'm going through the whole like sound mixing process of Boys, and 3 and
Yeah.
4 are being worked on right now.
Yeah.
So I had to constantly like watch these movies for the umpteenth time and make a bunch of notes. and
Right,
raise the
yeah.
music here.
Yeah.
Let's add a sound effect here and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Cool.
so that's what's coming up. We'll see.
And that might feature pieces from us too, right?
Yes.
Is that the one?
Yes, Odie for Artists, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So you guys will be the next people to see the whole thing.
It's amazing because I want
Cool.
to see that. I love sad.
I love sad. Yeah.
And yeah, just
and I keep saying I'm like, oh, I'm retired from making micro budget features, or I'm not gonna work on stuff anymore. And I have a really cool friend who's like, you're not retiring, you just need to graduate. So we'll see. So for Blood, we have written 2 spin-off exploitation films. I'm not gonna call them sequels or prequels, but there's one that takes place before Blood. It's its own standalone thing with some characters from it.
Yeah.
We're making this like dark comedy that's a heist movie.
amazing. Oh my
And-
god.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But we're really leaning into exploitation film. And then the other one is a spin-off with 2 characters from Blood.
Okay.
It's kind of a road trip movie, but I don't want to tell you who they are and what they do because that'll spoil too much if you haven't
Yeah.
seen Blood. But
Okay.
really excited for those. And those are like the ones that we're hoping that Blood gets enough of a cult status where we can actually pitch these and properly
Yeah.
produce them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
And so
Never-
it's the Cum Blood cinematic universe.
the Gunblood set. And all my stuff is set. All my stuff is set in a shared universe. I
Yeah.
have references to everything.
Yeah.
You know? Even though some stuff is really wacky and like would not
Yeah.
be grounded in reality, it's all still set in a
Yeah.
same world. You know, if you watch all this stuff, you'll catch like you'll be like, oh, there's like a character in Blood that wears a T-shirt of a band that's featured in I'll Be Around. You know, so that's there's little things like that. Everyone smokes the same pack of cigarettes. You know, I try to avoid showing actual brands. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all that sort of stuff. But right now, I have 2 things I might be. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but I might be shooting,
Okay.
or I might have
Cool.
started shooting.
Amazing.
Exciting.
It's
That on my
exciting.
own. So we'll see.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
for
Yeah.
being here
for
with us
having me.
in the Night Temple.
Yeah. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you for having me.